Thank you all for having me. So my name is Kevin Larson. I'm from Microsoft's Advanced Reading Technologies team, which is a team that has been around for, I think, 25 years. I've been on it for the last 14 years of that. And it's a team that's dedicated to making on-screen reading easier and more pleasant. So we have commissioned many fonts over the years. We worked on the original Times New Roman, Courier, and Arial for Windows. Commissioned Verdana in Georgia in the 90s and did a lot of technology there. Commissioned all of the ClearType fonts in the 2000s. A lot of fonts, a lot of rendering technologies, and I'll be talking more about some of the recent work that our team has been doing. The website, I agree, there are actually two typography teams at Microsoft. And the other team is the one that owns the website, so I'm going to... But agreed, that needs some work. Okay, I'm going to jump into my top. Well, so my team is a small team of 7 people that where we've got 2 typographers, 2 scientists, which I'm one of the scientists, I'm a reading psychologist, and 3 engineers. And we all work together to figure out how do we make on-screen reading better. And by having these 3 different perspectives, it helps us that we each have different language and backgrounds that we come to the problem with, and we use all of the different backgrounds to come up with better solutions. Okay, so the format of the talk is I'm going to talk about kind of 2 main components to reading and things that we can do to improve each of those components. So the simple model of reading is that there are 2 aspects to it. One is decoding. How is it that you take a single word that's on page and recognize it? And that primarily has been the big problem with on-screen reading, that the quality of reading a single word on a page is way better than anything that we've ever done on computers. And so the history of the team has been figuring out, all right, what are font technologies, what are fonts, what are rendering technologies that we can make in order to make the on-screen reading experience of a single word somewhat comparable to what we can do in print. And that's still a topic that we're working heavily on. But we see that we're getting better, that it's getting to the point that between the advances in software and the advances in hardware, we're starting to come close. The other aspect to reading is comprehension, of how do you take more than one word and put them together. So if you take all the words in a sentence, what can you do to better understand that sentence? How do you make that sentence more understandable? How do you make a paragraph more understandable? How do you make a page, a document, a book more understandable? And that'll be the second half of the talk, which I'm a little more excited about because it's going to tie into a product that we're releasing that I'll show. All right, so I'm going to hit legibility for just a second, hopefully. And so up on screen, I've got 2 fonts, Verdana and Georgia. Which of these is more legible?
Right.
The right one? So Georgia is the right one. We're going to pretend that you guys know what Verdana and Georgia actually look like, because the projector is not helping us.
Well, the left side looks like the new IKEA manual, so we know that's Verdana.
The left side is Verdana, yeah, and it does look like the IKEA manual for a very good reason. All right, so who thinks?
Well, hang on, there's a fair choice. You've got 2 different fonts, but you've also got 2 different font sizes.
They are the same size in height, in both X height and cap height.
Not cool. That doesn't look great. It looks very smaller on the right.
So Georgia is narrower than Verdana, but in terms of point size, which is just height, they are matched here, or supposed to be matched.
I think the right-hand side is easy to read, only marginally.
Right-hand side is marginally more easy to read?
Marginally.
Yeah. All right, so let's do a vote. Who thinks Verdana on the left is easier to read?
Left.
Okay, at least half. Who thinks Georgia on the right is easier to read?
Bigger enough.
Nice. Okay, so good.
What's the outcome?
Well, so now we get to do science. We've got 2 fonts, we've got a strong disagreement. Some people will say, well, it's some serifs, and serifs are more legible, or other people will say sans serifs are more legible and say it's based on that, but we can just go collect some data. And there's a bunch of ways that we can do it, but the simplest version to do in a audience like this is similar to if you get an eye chart at an eye doctor to figure out what's your visual acuity. You figure out what's the smallest line you can read to, and that's your visual acuity. So what if we then change out the eye chart with an eye chart in a different font? If you can now read to a smaller size, that says that that font is more legible. And we know that if you can read it to a smaller size, when we give you a regular size, you're going to read it a little bit faster. So now we've got an eye chart version of Verdana and Georgia. And again, we're really not being helped by the projector. But the question is, to which of these can you guys each read to a smaller size?
You have to ask left or right first. And for me it's left again.
Okay, so we're going to do the voting. Once everyone has a chance to really try to read this, and I think I'm in the way of you guys still. All right, so who can read Verdana on the left to a smaller size? I would say more people than voted for Verdana earlier. Who can read Georgia on the right to a smaller size? A few of you.
We're all swayed, the population is swayed to
Yes,
the right.
to the right-hand side where the right's going to be a little bit bigger for you guys. So if we do this in a controlled study, we will find that everybody can read Verdana to a smaller size than Georgia. And I think if we had a normal, and I've done this in other audiences where everyone will vote Verdana. We've got a projector issue going on here. So Verdana, you can read to a smaller size, you're going to read it faster. Verdana is an incredibly legible font. Now, I'm not arguing in any way that Georgia is not a great font. It's a great font, and Georgia doesn't have its uses. But in terms of pure legibility, Verdana is better, and we can do this kind of test with it. So it turns out this kind of methodology we can also use for developing new fonts. So instead, if we don't want to just say which font is better than another, we're trying to make a new font, we can say, well, let's try making it a different way and test it and see what happens. And so this is exactly what we did in the Sitka project. So Sitka is the latest typeface to come from our team. And we went through, Matthew Carter was the designer, and we went through 15 different iterations where we would try different ideas and see, okay, if we make this change to it, does it make the font more legible? So here is one example of a test, and instead of doing it a whole font at a time like I showed in the last test, we were doing it letter by letter so we could see how to improve each letter. And so here is one of our tests where we compared a teardrop serif, which is the left version of each of these letters, to a flared serif version, which is the right version of these letters. Which version do you guys think is more legible?
There's nothing.
There's what?
There's nothing in it.
There's nothing in it? You can't see the difference between the two?
I can see the difference, but they're both equal.
They're both equally legible. Okay. Any other?
At that size.
Flares.
With small, with a small number of pixels, there will be one too many pixels used for the serifs, right?
One too many pixels used for the serifs. There will be an additional pixel that's going down. So it's a question of, is that beneficial for legibility or is that going to harm legibility?
It would probably be detrimental, right? No?
That's why we do the science.
Professor Skipper.
I think it's going to depend on the resolution of the reader device.
So we're doing this on very,
Jumps.
yeah, so we're not,
Low-res device versus a high-res device.
so in this particular study we were doing it at larger sizes and using a speeded task. So we were trying to rule out the effect of resolution or even of hinting because we were doing this all pre-hinting.
Some fonts don't do upload, it's not a device.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're trying to ignore that at this phase of the design. All right, so here's what happened. Well, actually, let's get a vote. So who thinks the teardrop serifs are going to be better? Teardrop serifs on the left.
In the end, 50-50.
Okay, who thinks the flared serif on the right is going to be better? Few more. Definitely more. All right, you guys are correct. So for each of these letters, actually for 3 of these letters, the C, the F, and the J, The flared serif version performed better, where it was a wash or a slight lean for the A, where the teardrop serif did 1 point better. So in the end, we took this data. We knew that it performed better for at least 3 of the 4 letters. We decided, well, we're going to make the whole font with the flared serif version, and not to do something silly like, okay, the A performed better. So that's how we went about designing Sitka. And so we went through that whole project, and that was that. And I'm going to just start jumping topics fast to cover more ground. Okay, so we're still in decoding and trying to figure out, all right, how do we make individual words more legible? And this is the big issue in dyslexia. That dyslexia is the ability for a kid to take a word and pull it up on screen is the big problem. It's not comprehension. You can test that by looking at dyslexics' listening comprehension. And we find listening comprehension among dyslexics isn't terribly worse than non-dyslexics, but decoding is terrible. So from the 1920s to the 1950s, the main theory of dyslexia is that it was a problem with letter flipping, where you'd see the image that went to the left hemisphere was different from the image that went to the right hemisphere, and they thought that it was a problem of hemispheric domination, that you had to pick one hemisphere to recognize the letter, and if you didn't, then you'd get this flipping problem. And still, popularly, that is thought to be the problem in dyslexia, though in the research community, this was completely demolished by the 1970s. And so I'm going to show you guys the study that demolished it. So what I'm going to do is, right at this cross mark, I'm going to flash a letter very quickly. Your task is to name that letter out loud, okay? And it's going to be B's and D's and P's, right? Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
B.
Good. 3, 2, 1, go.
P.
Good. 3, 2, 1, go. D. Okay. So if any of you guys were dyslexic, dyslexic people will get about a 10% error rate on that particular task, where non-dyslexic people have a trivial error rate on that task. Now we're going to do a second task. Instead of naming the letter, what you're going to do is write it on the table in front of you with your finger. You can use a pen if you want, but a finger is just fine. All right, are you guys ready? 3, 2, 1, go. 3, 2, 1, go. 3, 2, 1, go. Oop, on to the next screen. So dyslexics do not have a high error rate at that particular task, same error rate that non-dyslexics have. So if it was a visual imaging problem, you'd expect the same error rate in both, but you don't get that. Instead, you only get it when you have to name the letter. And so the problem in dyslexia that everyone moved to in the 70s is that it's a phonological deficit, that it's a problem in dealing with the sounds of the language. And while B and D and P are very similar shapes, and that's what people went on at first, they're also very similar sounds. They're all stop consonants. B and P differ in, I think, 20 milliseconds of silence right in the middle of it. And that seems to be the problem for dyslexia. And so all of the dyslexic schools and the good dyslexic research is around how do we teach phonology to dyslexics. And so this is true. So these are the 3 steps that all kids need to take in order to become good decoders. The first thing they have to learn is all of their letters and be able to quickly name all the letters. Second is phonemic awareness, and this is the big one both for non-dyslexic kids and for dyslexic kids, that if you can learn that there are this set of sounds in the language, and English has 42 to 45 sounds, if you can learn all of those sounds and be able to play with them, you're going to become a good reader. So if at the age of 4, if I say the word cat and ask you what sounds are in it, if you can say k and a and t, you're going to be a good reader. The problem is, if you ask most kids what are the 3 parts to the word cat, they'll tell you its head, its body, and its tail. Which it makes sense. Kids are going to think about what a cat is and not about the sounds of the language. So if you can get the kids to think about the sounds of the language and manipulate it, they're going to go on to become good readers. So if we look at 4-year-olds and measure their phonemic awareness abilities. The ones that have it are going to go on to become good readers, and if we look at 2nd and 3rd graders who are still struggling to read, we'll frequently find that those are the kids that still don't have phonemic awareness. And this is true both for dyslexics and non-dyslexics. And then the 3rd step is simple once you have the 2nd step mastered, that it's how do you map up the letters to the sounds of the language, popularly known as phonics. If you try to do that before you understand that there are a finite set of sounds in the language, it's really hard and you struggle with it because you need the 2 endpoints to be able to link things up. So this is where most of the dyslexic research is. It's in this phonemic awareness component. There is, though, recently a new area of research is around what's called the Magnocellular Deficit. And there may be a visual component to dyslexia here, and we find this fascinating. So it has to do with, there are 2 routes that process vision that go through the brain. And one comes in through magnocellular cells, which are larger cells that are good at processing motion, and those cells will tend to go up the dorsal path. So this is my brain pointed this way, and so vision comes in through the eyes, goes to the visual cortex right back here, and then information can either go up or down. And this up part is more important for processing motion and where things are. And the bottom part is more involved in processing what things are. And so the information for the what things are is coming from parvo cells, which are smaller cells that come from the eye to the back of the brain and then down. And so reading, you'd think, oh, well, that's all parvo cells, because you've got to figure out what are all these letters, how do we recognize them, how do we put them together. And for the most part, that is true. But the interesting thing is that dyslexics process motion differently, that in brain imaging studies you find areas that are responsible for processing motion become way more active in dyslexic readers, in dyslexic people than in non-dyslexic people. And it's thought that this motion processing difference is screwing up reading. And so one of the ways that we can tell is through something called crowding. And I'm going to show you guys what crowding is. All right, so we're going to do another demo. Here, you guys are to look at that minus sign. And somewhere around here, I'm either going to put up 1 or 3 objects. Sometimes those objects will be letters, sometimes those objects will be other things. Your task is to either name the one thing that's there if it's only one thing, or the middle of the 3 things if there are 3 things. Okay? But you've got to look at the minus sign during this. All right? Everyone on board? Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Arm.
Everyone saw arm. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Arm. You're looking at the minus sign, right? All right. 3, 2, 1.
Pretzel.
Pretzel. Pretzel, diamond shape. Hamburger. All right, one more. 3, 2, 1. Hamburger. Okay. So what you are seeing is, you guys got the arm and the R right, and then the second one was the pretzel, hamburger, pizza, and then the hamburger by itself. For every person, there will be a distance away from it that they'll be able to succeed at this task. So if I had had you look right here, everyone would have gotten all 4 right, and then some distance out, there'll be a point where you can get to the single letter or object when it's in isolation, but won't be able to get the middle of 3 objects. Even though the amount of information reaching your brain is going to be identical for the middle object for whether it's in isolation or not. So crowding is a general visual phenomenon when there are flankers surrounding an object you're looking at. It makes it harder to recognize an object when there aren't flankers.
Are
Question?
you going to score better necessarily if it's just letters rather than objects?
One more time, please.
Are you necessarily going to score better if it's just letters, say, rather than if it's any kind of.
Are you going to score better if it's just letters? You will in this particular case because you're able to use top-down knowledge that it's ARM, that I've used a word. If I put 3 random letters, you wouldn't.
Even through the different number of objects that you can expect is smaller. I mean, the reason why I would have expected letters to be easier to recognize is simply because I know there are only 52 to show up. So basically, recognize. My problem was first decoding what kind of objects are there.
Okay, so it doesn't matter letters versus hamburgers. The interesting aspect is single hamburger versus pretzel hamburger blah, or the single R versus the ARM. So that's the crowding issue. And so the interesting thing here is that dyslexics show a lot more crowding than non-dyslexics. So they need to be closer in order to be able to succeed at this task than non-dyslexics do. So given that, some researchers out of Italy, Zorzi and Andre Focchietti, said, well, if crowding's a problem, can we just increase the space between everything? Can we take the space between the letters, words, and lines and increase them all and find an improvement? And shockingly, they did. There was by taking roughly this much space, and they used Times New Roman, which I can't even tell what font this is here. They increased the amount of space and found a 50% reduction in errors when reading out loud and a 10% increase in reading speed only among the dyslexic kids, not finding a benefit for the non-dyslexic kids in their study. We have tried to replicate this with a dyslexic school in Seattle and haven't succeeded in replicating it. We know of other labs that are having trouble replicating this. But there does seem to be an effect for at least some dyslexic people that having this increased spacing is beneficial. So I don't think we conclusively know what the answer is, but this is something that we're looking at because we do think that it helps some subset of people anyway. All right, so that is dyslexia, and I'm going to move on unless there are questions. Yeah.
Is one of the complicating factors when you're trying to replicate this Italian stuff the fact that in English you cannot just do it letter by letter?
That's a great question. In the original study, they studied both Italian and French dyslexics to exactly address that question, that Italian is a very surface, good letter to sound mapping, where French is terrible like English is. Yeah. Okay, reading test for everybody. I'm going to put a word up on screen, and your task is to name that word as fast as you can. So everyone ready? Out loud. Yeah? Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Nobody named it. How come nobody named it? Of course it's pronounceable. It's a word. It is an actual word. It's a Welsh word.
I don't speak Welsh, but the W at the beginning of the second line should be there. We hyphenated the B and the W.
Oh, tough audience.
Dang. Okay, so kids during their primary school years have to learn about 3,000 new words a year, or about 8 new words a day. So they are coming across what's, for them, essentially this all the time. And so they're going along reading, and they get to some gobbledygook, and it's hard to read, because you just don't know what that is until you are proficient at it. And so you guys aren't used to reading this, so this was very tough to read. Now, try to read it when I put it like this.
We're not sure how to read.
Well, Okay, so we've got a bit of an issue that it is Welsh, but now suddenly everyone has an idea of how to try. That before there was just, oh, that's complete nonsense, there's no way I can do anything, but this, okay, I've got a shot at it, I can figure this out. And so the same is true for kids, that if you get a word that was a multi-syllable word that you had no shot at before, by breaking it into its 2 or 3 syllables, you suddenly have a shot at doing it. Now the interesting thing is that you see how this is going to work for kids coming across new words. If we test this with adults on words that you know, normal words, not Welsh train stations, you will name those words several percent faster, I think 5% faster, than if we give you the regular words. And this is for native adult readers. You will benefit by having your text broken up like this. And there are some languages, Finland and Russia, where their children's books, they already do this, that they will take the books and provide them with the syllable markup. And I think there's even an expression in Russian for when something's really easy, it's being done by syllables. So here's another thing that we can do to improve decoding and reading. All right, so going back to it, there were 2 parts to this talk. First is looking at what can we do in decoding to make decoding easier. Second part is what can we do to make it easier to bring together the words, in this case, in a sentence. All right, so we are going to all read a sentence together. And we're going to parse it as we go. All right, so the first 2 words that we're getting in this sentence is the girl. Does anybody want to guess what the sentence is going to be about? You could guess the next words, or what you think this is what's going to happen.
So next will be a verb.
The next word will be a verb. Okay. Well, so we agree that the subject of the sentence is the girl. So the sentence is going to be about a girl.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
How about now? What do we know now?
The girl is the subject of the sentence.
Girl is the subject. Yeah.
And the next would be about what? Yeah.
What's the next word going to be?
It would be something that you told you.
We need some kind of complement.
Yeah.
Anyone want to guess what the next word is? That?
Or about.
About?
Something.
Something? All right.
Yeah.
The girl knew the answer. So what's the sentence about?
It's a statement of fact.
It's a statement of fact. So I'm imagining, okay, Joe, what do you got?
Are you asking for topic or subject?
No, I'm just, okay, here is what I'm imagining, that there's a classroom and there's a girl in it and she knows the answer, and maybe the teacher has just asked a question and she's going to raise her hand because she knows the answer. Reasonable?
Sure.
Okay. All right, here is the rest of the sentence. So suddenly this girl who knows the answer really doesn't know the answer. She knows something else entirely, right? Yeah. So this is what's called a garden path sentence. So when you're reading a sentence, you're getting exactly what I've shown you, that you are reading words more or less serially. So the girl knew the answer, and you've built up what the sentence is about, and then you get to what's wrong, and suddenly the girl doesn't know the answer. The girl knows something else entirely. So you have got to back up and figure out what it is that the girl knows. And so this is called a garden path sentence. Here is, does anyone know what a garden path sentence is? Here's the classic garden path sentence. Raise your hand when you understand what this sentence is that I'm about to show you.
I'm a linguist.
Okay, fair enough. Anyone? Got it? Got it back. Or 5. Most of the room is still pondering. Raise your hand when you just understand what the sentence means. You understood what the sentence means? Okay.
I'd understand it if I knew what the noun fell was.
That means you don't understand it yet. All right, so to understand it, you've got to imagine that there are two horses. There's one that ran by the river, and there's one that ran by the house, ran by the barn, and it was the horse that ran by the barn that fell, or the horse.
You just put that in.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Do I need to put that in there?
For non-British speakers, this gentleman's British. That's more of a British concept. No, Kevin was stood up in front of us giving a presentation. It's the same construct here.
Put it before the two
raised
other
past the
sentences
bar.
is perfectly understandable to Americans too.
It's understandable with the horse. And I'm telling you that's British English. That's not Canadian.
No, this is a normal, it's a confusing English sentence because raced appears to be the verb of the sentence. But once you know that it's the horse that raced past the barn fell, it's totally fine.
You're missing the word that.
It doesn't have to be there though, just as it wasn't here.
And that has two possible meanings anyhow.
No, that changes with the dependent clause.
I agree having a that there would disambiguate it, but it doesn't have to be there.
Yes, but it would mean something else, because here race is the passive
Did you ever do grammar parsing?
Sorry, sir.
Parsing phrases?
Do I? Yes.
So what was race past the barn?
So that is optional in the grammar parsing trees. Yeah. Okay, so in any case, what we've got here is a garden path sentence. Garden path sentences are confusing. Everyone knows that. And so here are, another form of so we've already seen the girl knew the answer was wrong, and that's a garden path sentence. The sentence above it, the girl knew the answer by heart, is not a garden path sentence. And so if we have people read these sentences and we ask them when they understood them, we find that people are able to understand the top one faster than the bottom one because the bottom one is a garden path sentence. Now, while these are not terribly confusing sentences, I've lost everybody. Garden path sentences are overboard. There is something that we do in speech that helps to disambiguate these two sentences. Does anybody know what it is? Is there a way that I can say the second sentence different from the first in order to disambiguate it? Change the tone of the last word? Say it for me.
The music of the two sentences is different.
Okay, can you do it for me?
The girl knew the answer by heart. Goes down. The girl knew
Oh, you
the
have in the
answer
back.
was wrong. Sounds
Yeah.
We can say, the girl knew the answer by heart. The girl knew the answer was wrong. You pause. You replicate it.
So you're almost right. So what we do,
The girl knew the answer was wrong.
again, almost right.
Changes the sentence.
So close. So it's not a pitch change. What we do is extend the vowel just before a phrase boundary. So the knew in this case, in the first sentence we'd say the girl knew the answer by heart. In the second sentence we'd say the girl knew the answer was wrong. So we'd indicate there's a major phrase boundary coming here. Pay attention. And so we do this vowel extension all the time in every sentence that we say completely naturally as an indicator of the syntax. Yeah?
Your extension of the new in the second sentence is sort of a contradistinction to a hypothetical previous sentence. It can easily be read without extending. The girl knew the answer was wrong.
Certainly it could be understood without that, but what I'm saying is that is what we do.
So there's an example. I wonder if this will show what you try to get us at the phrase, the sentence, fruit flies like the So it doesn't make sense at first. fruit doesn't fly. Fruit flies, but this is fruit flies like bananas. And then in that case, it's indisputable that it's about pitch, intonation, length, and so on. Because you're distinguishing fruit flies from fruit flies.
Yes.
It's an established fact that
Yep.
you have a compound. So
I think we're in agreement on that one, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is that the problem is that it's going back to that. In the cases that you had before,
Mhm.
in the past we had to use that. It's two different that's. One is here is the girl knew that the answer is wrong. And then we eliminated that and now we say the girl knew the answer was wrong. In the other example that you had the horse raced past the barn and fell. And it would normally say what you would have said before. The horse that raced past the barn fell. But because we have chosen somehow in a syllable where we eliminate that in English, then we need to substitute that with a pause or with the elongation of the vowel and then.
So the extension of the vowel is not restricted to just replacing the word that, but I can, I think I pulled the slide out. So in the case of the horse race past the barn fell, what I'm going to extend is the R in barn, because that's the last vowel before a major phrase. And so this is a general rule that what we do before any phrase is extend the vowel right before it. And that's for subject-verb breaks, for any sort of major break, subordinate clauses. So this is something that we do. I don't think we need to dwell on it that much. But I think you got the point that there are tricks. So my point is that there are tricks that we convey in spoken language that don't make it into text today. My next point is that punctuation evolves very slowly. So we're looking at a manuscript here from 517 AD, and what do you guys notice about it?
It's in Latin.
It's in Latin. Yeah. Yeah. It has semicolons, yeah.
And all semicolons and colons.
Semicolons and colons. I think somebody noticed what I was looking for.
No capital letters.
There are no capital letters.
There's the Carolingian discule, so there wouldn't be capitals, but there's no word spaces.
There's no word spaces. So that is what I wanted to call out, is at this point in time, we did not break up the words by word spaces. Eventually, we did add word spaces. It took a few hundred centuries, and a bunch of people along the way said, I know how to read. What do I need word spaces for? Today, you could still read perfectly fine if I removed all the word spaces from your text, but you'd read slower. I don't recommend it. It kind of sucks. And so we've added word spaces sometime in the last 1,500 years. We are also currently in the middle of changing how we use commas. So in this sentence, how many commas do we need? Who wants to vote we need no commas? Some of you. Who votes we need 1 comma? Couple. Who votes we need 2 commas? A few of you. Who votes we need 3 commas? Nope. Nobody for 3 or more? What? All right. So among the people who voted for 1 comma, where does that comma belong?
After years.
After ears? Everyone for after ears? Or are there...
The one comma, that's where we don't put commas in front of
The
noun
meaning
phrases.
changes. With a comma after years, it changes the meaning.
Okay, wait. I want to get, before we overrun everybody, for the 1 comma people, does everyone agree as it goes after ears? I think there is another interpretation. No? Come on, don't be bullied.
If you put it it after Met.
There are definitely people who will put it after Met.
We're gonna have to wait and have to also match it with after years because that's one of the
Then you're going into the 2 comma version. All right, so historically, I would say 200 years ago, most people would have been more 1 comma after Met. And that is because 200 years ago, the use of commas was really to indicate where an orator would breathe. And in the last 200 years, the comma has been evolving to being more of a syntax marker. And it hasn't made it all the way there. So if you look at grammar books and where commas are supposed to go, oh my God, do they not agree at all? And so it's this transition between oration and syntax that we're still going through. So I would expect to find, and I know I have found in other audiences, that if I restrict you to just 1 comma, some people will put it after Met. And the syntax people will put it after years. So we're still going through a change in punctuation today. And what I am proposing is a new kind of punctuation. So is there a way of marking up the syntax that people are going to find beneficial? And there have been tests actually going back to the 1950s where people have tried marking up syntax either by putting space between each of the phrases, putting each phrase on its own line, or what we've done here, we've marked all the verbs in a different color and put brackets around the subordinate clause. Now when we test how well people read with the syntax markup, turns out that people will immediately read with about 10% higher comprehension. That we don't have to tell people at all what they're doing. We don't have to tell people what spaces mean, what new lines mean, what this color and bracket version means at all. Because syntax analysis is such an important part of sentence comprehension, having these markers is incredibly intuitive. And it improves your comprehension immediately because of it.
Kind of spoils the fun of fruit flies.
It's true. It's true. It disambiguates. It makes the girl knew the answer was wrong, not a garden path sentence anymore, and we don't have to go back. I don't feel bad about that at all. All right, so combined, what we've done is we have made a new reading view inside of OneNote that's right now a separate download called Learning Tools, where we've made all of these different features available. A dyslexic view if you want the very wide space version. You can take any page and have it marked up by syllables. You can take any page and have it marked up by syntax. And it also has the other reading view features that you'd expect, like text-to-speech.
Language independent or English only?
Right now it is English only. Yeah, and American English only at that. But yes, that is, we want that. And if I haven't run out of time,
No,
I'm
please,
still
sir.
okay.
We have a few more. What I'm going to suggest is you take maximum time and leave the questions for
Oh
the
no
ball game.
no! I've got a 2-minute video and then I'm done.
Okay.
And then I've left the rest of it for questions. But it's a 2-minute video about learning tools because we've rolled it out into a few test schools, and we made a video about one of the test schools that it went to.
Okay,
And
great.
it's kind of cool. All right. Need to do anything? Just play. Oop. Let me start this over.
Is there really no captioning yet?
There is no captioning on this. Sorry. Sorry, Joe.
Talking about yesterday, guys. I am a resource special education teacher. I target groups of students who need intervention for either reading, language arts, or math. These are kids that struggle every day. And to watch them grow and learn and have those aha moments is so rewarding to me, and it just makes my heart soar. We have ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia. I have a student who reads on a 3rd grade level, but then I have a student who reads on a kindergarten level, and I have to find a way to bridge the gap. We've been using OneNote since the beginning of the school year. Even in this short amount of time that we've had it, it's been completely transformational. When we first started using OneNote, I thought, okay, this is going to take us a while to get going, and we're going to have to learn how to use it. 3 days. It took them 3 days to master OneNote. I have a dyslexic student who's also dysgraphic. He still reads on a kindergarten level. You know, he's 10 years old, he's still learning sight words, and you know, he would tell me all the time that he was stupid. When we started this school year, he read 4 words per minute. For the longest time, I struggled with how to help him. And when we got the learning tools with the immersive reader, he went to 22 words per minute. I never thought in one calendar school year that we would even get into double digits. And he's at 22 words per minute, and he stayed there. Students especially, it's really transformed their educational experience. I don't know what next year will look like. I don't know what our possibilities are, because in my wildest dreams I never thought this would be what it is. Sky's the limit.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. As I was saying, we'll do a few questions, but we'll try to keep them short because Kevin's here for the week. He's at the ball game. Yeah, snooze, you lose. Those people who aren't there at the ball game, we can corner him at the ball game and maybe buy him a beer or something. Just one small comment. Many of you know that I was introduced to TUG in San Francisco, and the project at the time was Bunsey's World. It was inspired by my daughter, and I saw those IEP scores, and I started to tear up because my daughter did have an IEP, and she is a Surface user now. And it really is something important. Dave kindly asked me a lot of very personal questions, which now I'm feeling uneasy. I revealed so much about myself, but literacy is the most powerful force for the protection of personal liberty, and I believe it with every bit of my heart. And if we can promote literacy everywhere and tools like this, I think the world could be a whole lot better. Dave.
Now, where do you apply this in Microsoft, your research?
This is shipping.
Yeah, I understand that. But you apply it, for instance, in all the other products that you have, or
I would absolutely get killed if I made any product announcements, but Satya, our CEO, is very excited about this, and it's not going to end with OneNote.
Okay.
Norbert.
In this small movie, you show this big increase in word recognition and reading rate. Does this carry over to reading without the aid? I mean,
it's a good question, and I would.
How was this measured? Was this measured?
So the measures that I talked about during my talk, I can confidently describe the science that went into those and why each of those features work. In the video, what the teacher did is whatever their measures were during the year, and I don't have the details of those. And those were single subject measurements, which, from a scientific standpoint, you completely discard. But from a heart-wrenching video point of view,
I'm sure that this reading methods helps a lot for reading, especially for dyslexia. But it would be interesting if this helps if you get rid of.
If it carries over beyond the treatment. Sure. I don't think anyone has looked at that. Nobody has looked at that.
Yeah, just the switch.
Thank you.
You talked at the outset about fonts. I love Times Roman. That's what I use for everything. And it has this serifs on them. And I suppose it slows some people down. But when you come to something like capital I, small l, and the number 1, in some fonts they all look exactly the same. And it's going to be confusing, especially in something like a web address where people can have any of those.
Agreed? No, I think Chuck is talking about that this week.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
That's what are being said, but that's fun.
One thing I've always argued with people is that many languages have a notion of parenthesization. In German, with the separated prefixes, or in English, the permanent
Yep.
separated prefixes,
Yep.
now postfixes. So the verb that's prefix, they sort of form two parentheses in which you can put lots of stuff in, and then you can come up with many other things. And that's exactly what you're putting up as one of your features. I think it's really neat.
Thank you. Yeah, no, in Russian, you've got to mark every phrase with a comma. And so there's less syntax to mark there, that it's already very syntax marked.
Russian is syntax comma exclusive.
In German as well.
German as well.
Christine, did you have?
Actually, it's my daughter's conversation, I'm too shy to mention it. It's instances like the word often. When you make your syllable boundary, you lose the often. The T gets pronounced as well. The OF on its own, the child learns is of. So the result will be of 10. This word, the hyphenation boundary also breaks the syllable clusters. Those changes that happen because of the
Yeah, no, that's an interesting, it's an interaction between phonics and syllables. And how do you deal with that for languages that aren't, that are English and French, where it's weird? Are there things that we can do to make a better mapping between letters and sounds is the interesting question.
Define a color for, yes, this is where the syllable boundary is, but beware the sounds do something
I
different.
think that's a great idea.
Kevin, there's a question here.
I was going to comment that the grammatical markers you showed.
The radical markers? Grammatical.
Yeah. There is many in academic journal, history book, complex description, and experimental apparatus, where I'm doing that mentally to try and understand what's happening in the sentence. Those would be very helpful to, like, okay, I'm going to ignore these 2-3 lines here, get the general idea, then go and fill in the middle.
Everything I showed here, we've targeted at kids because it's easier to show kids unusual things. There's less resistance to it. All of these things work for adults. And yeah, when I started playing with the syntax markup, it had very interesting effects on my writing as well. That I was writing to make sure that I didn't have garden path sentences.
Arthur, did you have something?
No, mostly what Christina said.
Norbert?
Do you have any studies about dyslexia or effects in non-Roman alphabets, especially kanji, hanzi?
No.
Good answer.
Good answer. No,
when you were comparing Verdana and Georgian, I'm wondering if one of the effects that was happening for me is that I'm more familiar with one font than the other. Does that play a role in how
We have looked at the effect of familiarity on fonts, and it was a PhD thesis by Sophie Bayer trying to look at that. And I would say that we have not, I thought that familiarity probably had no effect, but we could not rule it out based on that study. So people have looked at it, and I don't have an answer.
Any final comments? Yes, Stefan.
To the beginning, that Verdana and Georgian. I think you were a bit screwed because if in a big size, as widely spaced out word is, I think, still harder to read than a narrow word, which is easier to spot than a wide one. It gets better if it gets smaller, but in big letters, I still think it's a narrow font is better. That's why the opinion was so different.
So if you're not controlling for area, it's definitely false that the larger size is more legible. If you're doing some area control to force the wider version to be shorter while keeping its proportions the same, then I don't know exactly what that trade-off is. But in general, larger is more legible, and something that I have to fight with Microsoft people about a lot is that optimal reading size is much closer to 24 point than it is to the 8 or 10 point that we frequently see.
For me, it's a difference if you have a large one, a white word, read there, or have it narrow, the word with a moving eyes, see shape, not having such a wide space to cover.
Nope.
I had a study that was done 2 years ago where they mixed all the letters in the word, and they kept the first letter and the last letter, and then you can recognize the word right away. But if you spread out the letters,
So that was, yeah, so the actual data on that is when all the letters of a word are in their correct order, you will read them the fastest. If you move letters by only one position, if you're actually moving the letters randomly, you'd make it completely illegible. But if you're moving letters only by one position, if you keep the first and last letters intact, it will have the least reduction on word recognition speed. Switching the last one will have the second least effect. Switching the first letter will have the biggest effect. But all of these reduce word recognition. What's amazing about it is that we can recover it as well as we can, but it's not something I recommend doing.
I'm going to have the last word. Some of you, or all of you, have received email from the organizing committee. There's a lot of work afoot on electronic inking, but as a small token of our appreciation for Kevin making the trip, he played in a tennis tournament all weekend long, so he made some real effort to get over here. We have old school inking. As you know, there's a pen auction in support of TUG. Kevin, it is our honor to offer you one of the fountain pens that is on auction, and either black or blue fountain pen ink. So,
thank you.
So
thank you very much.
And those who are interested, please do support TUG. I have 2 working fountain pens.